All right, so moving on to another AFC East team we want to cover today, the Buffalo Bills. They've been the leader in this division. They definitely were last year, and the year before they were right up at the top as well, competing with Miami. And I don't know, I think this team got even better. They're coming off a huge playoff game against the Chiefs. That might be, I don't know how you feel about this, but maybe one of the, if not the best playoff game I've ever seen between the Chiefs and the Bills. What did you think about that game? Would you put that at the top of your list for what you've watched?
Honestly, yeah, I'd say that was a pretty amazing thing. I know people are very like questionable about like overtime rules, but like honestly, that game
Mhm.
was amazing. I thought the back and forth scoring was great. That's exactly what you want to see. That's what the playoffs should be. Like it's kind of lame. Like blowouts are cool and all, but like in the playoffs, you really want to see like just back and forth. And that's what honestly, it's definitely one of the best games I've seen in a while.
For sure, and I think it's cool that not only was it an incredible game, it also might have the legacy of like fixing the overtime rules in the NFL as well
Sure.
because
Yeah.
of the ending. Because obviously Buffalo didn't get their chance to come back, and this year if that opportunity comes up, they will be able to do that. And I also just think they're a better team this year, which we can get into.
Yeah.
So this team, a lot of the same people are come back. McDermott's still the coach. Brandon Beane's still your GM. Offensive coordinator Brian Dable did depart, but they do have Ken Dorsey moving up from quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator. He's been with the organization for a couple of years, and Leslie Frazier coming back as the D coordinator. So a lot of continuity with this team, which is always what you want to see from a Super Bowl contender, a Super Bowl hopeful in Buffalo. And then looking at the team, a lot of familiar faces, but I think certain players are going to have a bigger role this year. Most on offense, most notably Gabriel Davis, who, coming off what we were just talking about the game, he had the 4 touchdowns, set the NFL record for touchdowns in a playoff game.
Yeah.
I mean, with Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders at the door, I think he's in line for a huge uptick in his role. They brought in Jamison Crowder, who he gets hurt a lot, but I think when healthy is one of the better slot receivers in the league.
For sure.
And you look at their O-line, they added Roger Saffold, who coming off a Pro Bowl year with the Titans. Add him to Deion Dawkins, Mitch Morris, Ryan Bates. These are all good offensive linemen. And then the big signing, which we can get into, they bring in Von Miller coming off a bounce back year with the Rams at the second half of the year, helping them win the Super Bowl. They signed him to a 6-year, $120 million deal, 51 million guaranteed. He's already 33 years old, but he is coming off 9.5 sacks in the regular season and 4 sacks in the playoffs. So when you look at that addition to an already really good defense, which we'll get into the rest of the defense shortly, I'm sure. Do you like that contract for the Bills, or do you think it was an overpay? I mean, I think everyone thinks it's an overpay,
Yeah.
but are you still in favor of the deal for them?
I actually am. I'm kind of like 50-50 on this deal, and it's not necessarily for the reason everyone might think. I see a lot of people saying, oh, they overpaid because like he's getting older. You never know. I don't think it's because he's getting older. Honestly, pass rushers, weirdly enough, is a position people play for a long time because
Yeah, that
like
is true.
which is it's kind of like the opposite of the O-line. The O-line is the ones because they're the ones taking the beating from the D-line, right?
Mhm.
But I think it's an overpay because I think that the Bills didn't take into account that Von Miller was so good for the Rams because of how many other good players he was playing besides. Like, and that's not to take away from Von Miller because obviously he was stupendous, but like I think they're expecting that same level of production, and I think he's going to drop down again. And not to say it's going to be terrible, but it will be considered a slight overpay because he's not performing exactly at that level. He'll still be good. Can't say he won't because it's Von Miller. I mean, Von Miller is one of the greatest pass rushers of all time. I don't think that's a huge controversial take. But I mean, he had Leonard Floyd who bounced back with the Rams. Like I think he's really like maybe he'll never live up to the first round status, but he's pretty decent last year. That's a big help. And then having Donald and Greg Gaines down there in the middle, like that's pretty good help. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration, but I don't think it's the worst contract ever. I think he's not going to see the end of the contract. Like it's kind of obvious because it's all front loaded. It's like a slight overpay, but it's kind of like that's splitting hairs, really. It's Von Miller, he's still great. So
Yeah, I think I agree with that take for sure. And I like your point about the supporting help. When you look at this pass rushing unit, unless Gregory Rousseau takes a huge leap in year 2, I think it's safe to say Von Miller is the number one, like the
yeah,
top guy in the front 7 for this Bills team.
yep,
And I do think, like you said, I think he'll continue to be a solid player. Like even with Denver last year, he was still pretty good in the half of the season he played with them. But when you look at what Von Miller did in the playoffs last year, with those 4 sacks across the 4 games, I believe it was, because I don't think they had the bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, Donald, Floyd, all those guys, yeah, they definitely open up Von Miller to have less pressure less protection against him from the offensive line. But I do like the signing because 51 million guaranteed. You said it's front loaded. I could see him filling out the contract. It's not likely, but you never know. I mean, this Bills team, I think they're going to be in contention for a long time.
Oh, for sure.
So, yeah, so I could see them maybe they'll restructure it, something like that. I could see if he likes it in Buffalo, maybe he does stay there for the majority of that deal. And you bring up a good point as well. Most of these all-time great pass rushers do maintain at least competency until their late 30s. Like Julius Peppers comes to mind. Even Reggie White, I believe.
Marcus Ware played for a while.
Marcus Ware is a good one. We saw what he did with Von Miller towards the end of his career in Denver. So
that's an underrated pass rush deal. That was excellent. Pass rush
that Broncos defense, one of the best I've ever seen. I feel like because it was only 1 year, I feel like a lot of people forget how good they were. But
yeah,
for sure, I think all those guys kind of prove the point. But I do think this is a good signing for the Bills. And you look at the rest of the defense, which the offense is amazing as well. But I actually really think the defense might be even more underrated. We just mentioned Rousseau, who he was their first round pick last year. Wasn't half bad as a rookie, but I think they're counting on him to be the other big edge rusher opposite Von Miller next year. What do you think about him?
I think Greg Rousseau is a great pick. I was a little upset when the Dolphins didn't take him. I initially wanted him over.
Who'd you pick over him? Jalen Phillips, gotcha.
Obviously, it didn't really matter because they both turned out good. But I think the Bills might be counting too much on Greg Rousseau and to an extent Boogie Basham to really take that leap in their second year. And I just don't know if they should really be, because honestly, to me, I feel that's the one weakness this team really has is the D line. I think that everything else is great. Their secondary is amazing. They added Kyer Elam, which is great.
Yeah.
But I think the only problem is I'm looking here at their projected starter, or as of now, starting line. And it's not giving me a lot of confidence. It's Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, and Shaq Lawson.
Do you like Shaq Lawson as a Dolphins fan? He left Buffalo briefly to go to your Dolphins.
I like Shaq Lawson, but I don't think I'm gonna be honest. I think Shaq Lawson really benefited from playing with Emmanuel Ogbah. Right. That for that 1 year we had him, and Calvin Van Noy also helped because we traded him to the Jets, and then we didn't really hear from him then. So,
I forgot. I actually totally forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think he really just benefited from having good players next to him. So he was able to capitalize on that. Not to say he's a bad player, but I think he really needs a good supporting cast. And if we're being honest, the rest of this D-line is not exactly inspiring. Ed Oliver has very much underperformed. Daquan Jones is a solid signing, but he's not stellar either.
Yeah. He's a good run help guy, but he's not going to change your team.
You shouldn't be counting on him to fix this D line, and it doesn't get any better with the backups AJ Epinesa, whatever it is. He's has not done anything since being drafted, and Boogie Basham really played badly last year. He really needs to step it up, and so I think that's their biggest problem. But honestly, everywhere else, this team is incredible. So I don't exactly blame them for willing to take that risk because everywhere else is solid. I mean, they also even upgraded their running backs. They drafted James Cook. Here it says currently James Cook is still the second, but if we're being real, he's going to be the number one.
I disagree with that a tad, but I do think James Cook will play a lot. I think he'll handle the pass catching third down back duties tenfold. But I think Devin Singletary, who I was really down on, even coming into last season, I thought he was kind of just a stopgap C-level running back. I was really down on him. And I thought his last month and his playoffs, he really stepped it up and really showed a lot of potential. And he's still relatively young, mid-20s. So I think the two of them are going to help each other a lot. I don't want to crap on Zach Moss too much, but he didn't really he just hasn't performed. And I think it's good that James Cook, obviously the cousin of Dalvin's coming in, or brother of Dalvin rather, coming in to pair with Singletary here.
You know what? I agree with that take. Honestly, you're right. I think maybe I'm being a little too low on Singletary. I just think James Cook will end up being the better back, and at some point will be the starter.
That's fair.
But you know what? I think honestly, I guess my issue is more with Zach Moss because I think Zach Moss. I think the reason Devin Singletary at times seemed so bad was because he always had to play. Like there was no one really else
True,
behind there to
true.
play. Like only now this season do they have like a competent depth chart. Like they have Cook, Zach Moss, and Duke Johnson.
Yeah.
Like that's
Duke Johnson was out of football. He was another guy on your Dolphins last year. I thought he was really good in the last month of the season.
yeah. I was kind of surprised no one really re-signed him, but I think it's
Yeah.
also because like I think people were like, if the Texans didn't re-sign him, he must not be playing. Like he must be
Yeah.
bad. I think that's the way people saw it, which I don't entirely blame them. Like if I see the Texans let go a player or like choose not to bring them back, like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
I guess we'll see, but I like Duke Johnson as the third running back in this backfield as well.
yeah, I think Zach Moss kind of. I don't. It feels a little too late for him to turn around his career with the Bills at the very least. I think if he
Yeah.
gets a new team, he might
Right.
improve. But as of now, I think it's too late on his Bills career.
Yeah, I would agree, and we'll see what happens, whether he makes the team or has to go elsewhere. We'll see.
For
So
sure.
just to wrap up our points on the defense before we get into this offense that I really want to expand on.
Oh yeah.
So Ed Oliver, you mentioned, I'm gonna give him one more year. He was a first round pick for them, and he hasn't been terrible, but he hasn't been a game changer in the middle for them. We'll have to see if he can step it up this year. But the linebacker core, Matt Milano, I think continues to be pretty underrated. I think he's a really solid outside linebacker. Tremaine Edmonds is always making the tackles for this team. He's not too bad either. But the secondary, I think, is what I absolutely love about this team. I know Tre'Davious White is coming off the ACL tear, but when he's healthy, I mean, easily at least the top 5 corner in the league, I would say. We saw 2 years ago or 3 years ago, he was at an elite level. 2 years back, still pretty good. And last year, he was back to being what I considered elite. Then he tears the ACL. But now he'll be coming back, and he's paired with Kaiir Elam, the first-round pick this year, plus Taron Johnson at the slot corner as well. So what do you think of that secondary? I know you're high on the Kaiir Elam draft pick.
Oh, I think the secondary is honestly one of the best in football. I think Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, I think they're incredibly underrated. And I think that's
Yeah.
totally unfair because they're definitely like the best safety duo in the league right now, like no debate.
Like literally, because they both made first team All Pro last season.
Yeah, they quite literally like are.
Yeah, I would agree. The contingents. We were talking about continuity earlier. I love that these guys, those two have been together since 2017. They were both signed as free agents. Of course, my Packers let Micah Hyde go. Browns didn't re-sign Poyer, and they've been the Bills guys for the past 5-6 years now. And I think that's really good for this Buffalo team.
I think the reason why people underrate them so much is because like their very original teams did, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, like they were good, but they were nothing special for the original team.
Yeah.
And I think people like they still kind of see them that way, even though that's like totally like a wrong way of thinking because they're incredible. Like there's no denying the fact that like they're the best safety duo. At least me personally, they're the best safety duo.
Yeah.
So I think that might be why maybe a little bit, but you know what? I'm sure they know how good they are, so I don't think they're too down about it either.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They're awesome. And then talk about Kaiir Elam. What makes you like this draft pick for them so much?
I like Kaiir Elam because I think, well, one, a huge thing is that he comes from one of the bigger schools.
Yeah.
He's playing some of the elite, like college talent level. And like, obviously there's a lot of players, especially to be fair, Kaiir Elam has some big shoes to fill because he's coming from the long line of highly drafted UF cornerbacks who do, and a lot of them have not played well. I mean, we've seen Quincy Wilson, Vernon Hargraves, like we've seen a lot of them flame out and not play amazing. So I think Kaiir Elam really needs to like put in that work if like history is to tell us anything. But I really do think he's going to be great. I mean, the guy's insane. I mean, he's huge. The dude's 6'2", and I think that's really important is that you at least need to have one big corner on your team because you really need someone who can shut down those like large opposing like wide receivers and tight ends because that's the problem a lot, right? Is tight ends are like the mismatches. They're too fast for the linebacker, too big for the safety. And I think that's where Kaiir Elam is going to really shine, helping out like with these bigger offensive threats that he has to deal with.
Another big thing with him, we've seen a lot of these corners lately come from a line of NFL family members, Patrick Surtain, Asante Samuel. His dad, Abram Elam, played in the NFL, and his uncle, Matt Elam, who was a first-round pick with the Ravens. So he's coming from a football background. And you mentioned he's trying to break that mold of the Florida cornerbacks. That was a great observation. Like, I'll be honest, I'm not as big of a college football guy as you are. It seems, but I didn't really know who he was till he got drafted by Buffalo. But he's definitely been doing the reading about him. He's definitely been a little overlooked when you look at Derek Stingley and Sauce Gardner being this draft as well. And
Yeah,
you add him to this secondary. If he pans out, they got 4 blue chippers all at corner and safety. Plus,
yeah,
like I was saying before, Teron Johnson, Ciaron Neal's coming back as well. He's been there for a while. He knows the system. Like, the secondary could be the best in the league. I'm hoping my Packers are able to fulfill that. We talked about your Dolphins as well, have an argument as well, but I think this Bills team is the very best, like, at
yeah.
least going into the season.
Yeah, I think the reason also why I'm a little like higher on Elam than a lot of people seem to be, because a lot of people kind of just didn't really care about the pick. They're kind of like, it's a late first rounder. He's projected late first, early second, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But me personally, I think it's important to note the fact that the Bills jumped up 2 spots to grab him. And I know that's like to a lot of people, it's like, oh, 2 spots, whatever. Like they got scared. They drafted him out of like desperation or something. So there's the chance that like it doesn't work out. It's always gonna happen. It could always happen. But I mean the Bills front office has been pretty consistent. So I have no reason to believe that Kyrie Elam doesn't have at least a good shot of fulfilling his potential.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you make a good point because I feel like a lot of times when these teams trade up in the first round, like, and they're teams that have already been a playoff team, they already have a culture. The Packers did this with Jair Alexander too. Like, they just see something and they know they have to get this guy. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure it doesn't work out every time, but I feel like that often, if a team's trading up to get a guy, they usually know
What
what
they're
they're
doing.
getting. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of like that move for them, and I think it could be the thing that unlocks this Bills secondary even further. And they're going to just have to hope Tre'Davious White is the same guy coming off the ACL. And if that's the case, this Bills defense could be really dangerous.
Honestly, I think a lot of like the Bills draft picks were pretty good. I think
Yeah, you mentioned Cook.
Cook, I mean, Cook's great. I think Cook eventually will be their full-time starter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the guy's great. So I don't really think there's too much to say about that. The third rounder is a linebacker. That's just good depth for them. It makes sense. You're playing a little bit of an older guy and Von Miller a lot. And so it's good to
Yeah.
have some young player to like come in and back him up. Because I think that's also like the second weakest part is their linebacker depth. But I think that's
Okay.
because their starters are so strong. I think their fifth rounder was a wide receiver who's projected to be a slot. It's Khalil Shakir.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's also a smart move considering like what you're saying about Jamison Crowder. He's getting a little bit older and he's injured sometimes. So it makes sense to, while you have a good slot guy in Jamison Crowder, draft his replacement and get him up to speed. And I think that's a smart play. It's low risk, high reward, And then,
Yeah.
of course, they drafted Punt God. Punt God, I've heard a lot of people saying that even though he's like amazing with
Is
like
that his nickname? Punt God?
Punt God, yeah,
Really? Interesting.
yeah. Um, so like he can really kick it deep, but he's not like the best,
Okay.
like at actually like accuracy and like holds and stuff like that, which is kind of important for Tyler Bass, who early
Yeah.
in his career had a little bit of a struggle with some misses. So it's going to be
Tyler Bass is a great kicker.
He
So,
is, but I think he just had a problem early on, and I think
yeah.
it's not great to bring in someone who's the like a kind of suspect when it comes to, but he could be amazing. Maybe he just needs like good coaching, and the Bills have great coaches, so I can't really complain about that one. So Punt God, I believe, will more likely than not work out, but it's always important to like keep
For
expectations low.
For those who aren't familiar, we're talking about Matt Ariza.
Ariza, yeah.
It's not Ariza like Trevor Ariza. I think it's Ariza.
I believe it is because there's the A in
Okay.
there.
Yeah, yeah. So he's
Yeah,
the 6th-round punter the Bills took. So
yeah.
we'll
I
see if
remember people were saying like this guy's gonna be the highest punter drafted, like one of the highest.
that's Jordan Stout, baby.
They're like, oh,
State
he's gonna go
alone.
so high. Well, I mean, Ray Guy went first round, so no one will ever
True.
be the
Yeah, but
highest.
that's Al Davis. Come on, he took a kicker and a punter in the first round over his career.
Admittedly, a Hall of Fame punter.
That's true. The only Hall
Oh,
of Fame punter. You're right.
exactly. I mean, he's got the punter award named after him. You guys got to be
Right.
crazy.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
They drafted a corner in the 6th, Christian Benford. That's a good attempt at depth. Makes sense to me. they need a little corner depth. So that's fair.
Yeah.
Drafted a lineman makes sense. And then they drafted a linebacker from Clemson with their last pick. Honestly, I think this is like weird, but I feel like drafting like the players that get drafted late from big time schools, I think are really underrated.
Yeah, because they were
Because
like competing with even better players. Yeah.
oh yeah, for sure. And I feel like a lot of them turn out at least decent. Like this guy's from Clemson. Maybe he'll be good, you know?
And I agree with you. I think their draft was really good. I'll admit I don't have a lot of opinions on anything past like the third round besides the punter, but
Yeah.
despite that, I think they did have a strong draft, especially at the top. So transitioning over into their offense, which we haven't really talked about that much besides the running backs. I mean, Josh Allen, first time we've said his name all pod, but come on, this is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Everyone, when he got drafted, everyone was saying he's going to be a project. He could be a bust. And, it took 2 years, but by the time 2020 season rolled around, Josh Allen proved that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And last year, I think he made an argument. I don't consider him the best quarterback in the league, but if you told me you think he's the best, I could see the case. And I think he's going to keep getting better. I'm not going to give any concrete predictions for any awards just yet. I think we'll save that for a pod towards the end of the summer. But Josh Allen's certainly in my short list for MVP candidates this season.
For sure.
Yeah, and now he has, in my opinion, he has his best supporting cast yet. Stephon Diggs, who 2 years ago might have been the best receiver in the league just from a statistical standpoint that season. And last year, even though the yardage went down, he had a lot of catches, and he was a clear, reliable number one target with Josh Allen. Gabe Davis, we mentioned earlier, I think he's going to make a huge leap as the number two. We mentioned Crowder. Another guy competing for that slot job. We got Shakir, we got Crowder, and then also Isaiah McKenzie, who's been there for a while. He had that one game last year where he had 11 receptions. Now that Cole Beasley's out the door, I think we're kind of hearing the talk that Crowder and McKenzie are kind of competing for that slot job. McKenzie's kind of been just a backup or a special teamer for a while, but we could see him have a bigger role this season as well. And then even, Packers fans know about Jake Kumaro and all the meme of the Packers cutting Jake Kumaro and that making Aaron Rodgers mad, but he's on this team. And then even Tavon Austin, who can at least, return some kicks if need be. And we talked about the running back room. Dawson Knox had 9 touchdowns last year. People were saying he had brick hands. Quite the opposite last season. He really turned it around.
Huge help on fantasy, dude. I picked him up like halfway through the year. Best decision I made.
Dawson Knox had a big bounce back year last year.
Oh, for sure. I think Dawson Knox is on his way to becoming one of the better tight ends in the league.
At least as a red zone target, I agree for sure. And with all these receivers, he's gonna be getting open.
Oh yeah.
And then just to wrap that up, they also brought in O.J. Howard as the backup tight end. We'll see if he can bounce back from his injuries. And then I like their backup signing of Case Keenum. I think that's a good veteran. We know he has the arm strength. We've seen him at least win some games, some years in the past. Like, he's not the most consistent guy. But for a backup, I think it's a perfectly fine addition. We didn't mention last time earlier with the Dolphins, but I think Teddy Bridgewater is also a really good backup for you guys. In Miami, he's proven to be quite the capable game manager in the past, and I see a similar role for Keenum. I think Case Keenum could make it work with Stephon Diggs. Well, Case Keenum has plenty of familiarity with Stephon Diggs. The Minneapolis Miracle, that's between those two players. So maybe if Josh Allen, hopefully he doesn't get hurt, but if the Bills are resting their guys, resting Josh Allen last week of the season, maybe we'll see a recreation of those two on the field together. So this offense is loaded. I would put it up there with almost any offense in the league. Would you agree with that? I mean, I'm sure you.
Oh, for sure.
Agree, but I don't know. I think this Bills team is going to win a lot of games this year. Who do you think could be outside of Diggs? Like, who do you think could have the biggest year? Would you say Gabe Davis, or do you think it would be someone else?
I think Gabe Davis is probably the best bet. I would say the next best bet would be fullback Reggie Gilliam. No, I'm kidding. It'd be probably either Gabe Davis or Dawson Knox. But I mean, personally, I think they're both going to take that next step into being like solidified. Like, these are very good players,
Yeah.
I think honestly it's a toss up. I think the better bet is Gabe Davis just because of the fact that he's stepping into an even bigger role, giving him a chance to improve even more over Dawson Knox, who's going to just keep being the number one.
Yeah, that makes
So,
sense to me.
but I do think both of them are really going to they're really going to stand out this year again, and definitely going to draft Dawson Knox this year ahead of time.
Yeah, and I'm hoping Gabe Davis, I traded for him in my dynasty league, gave up some stuff. I'm hoping he makes the leap as well. I really think this Bills team is going to win a lot of games, and that brings us, I guess, to their schedule.
Yeah.
So the NFL's they're kicking off the season on Thursday Night Football with a Bills game. They're visiting the Super Bowl champion Rams. They're kind of setting the Bills up, not necessarily for a loss, but I think Rams at home coming off their Super Bowl win. I would probably bet on the Rams in that game just because, they're home, they're coming off the championship. But I would hope that one loss to a really good team doesn't deter the Bills the rest of the season. I don't expect that to happen. So then just to walk through the rest of their schedule, home for Titans, in Miami for visiting you guys, in Baltimore, home for Steelers, in Kansas City, they got a week 7 bye, visited my Packers in week 8, in New York for the Jets, home for the Vikings, home for the Browns, in Detroit, in New England, home for the Jets, TBD with the Dolphins. I don't know what that's about, but in Chicago, in Cincinnati, and then TBD. Oh, TBD is the time. They're home for the Dolphins in that game, and then they're home for the Patriots in the last week of the season. So, not to pick each individual game, but after hearing that schedule, like what are you thinking for the Bills? Do you think they're going to be better than your Dolphins? Do you think they're the division winners?
Unfortunately, yes, I do feel that we'll be the division winners, but you know what? That's okay. The
Yeah.
Bills had a head start on rebuilding, and honestly, I think people really forget the fact that Josh Allen was a project at first. He was people nowadays are like, oh my God, the Messiah, but he needed time to develop, and they gave him that time, and he turned into what he is now. The dude's insane. I don't think, honestly, there's not many quarterbacks I'd say are better than Josh Allen right now. I mean, the guy's great, but I do feel the one thing the Bills really need to improve on from last year is losing stupid games that they should not. They had no business losing.
Remember that Jags game?
I mean, the Jags game,
be...
the Patriots game was absurd. There was no reason for them to be losing those games.
Oh, the game where the Patriots just passed the ball 3 times. I mean, I will admit it was quite windy and snowy that night, but come on.
Yeah, no. I mean, and the thing is that we saw in the playoffs how amazing they were against the
Patriots. Right. Thankfully, they
around.
made up for it. Yeah.
Yeah, but you should have also done that in the regular season. It doesn't make a difference at the end of the day now, but you don't want one of those stupid games they lose to end up being an important game, like a playoff game, because they should not have lost to the Jaguars. Absolutely.
Yeah. Especially the 2021 Jaguars, the absolute abomination that team was. But just to wrap up this schedule, here I've categorized, I did this earlier with the Dolphins. I've categorized the teams they're playing. You tell me if you agree. I think they're going to split with the Dolphins, as we mentioned earlier. I think you guys can pull an upset on them one of those weeks. I think they're going to beat everybody on their schedule except possibly these teams. The toss-up games I have are that Rams game week 1, which I'm leaning towards them losing. Visiting my Packers. Visiting the Bengals. I think they're road for the Rams. Yeah, not the Rams, the Ravens. Visiting the Ravens. And then visiting the Chiefs. So a lot of road games against really good teams, or at least teams that are expected to be really good. I still think they can win most of those games, but what would you say to that? Do you think there's any teams, maybe you think the Vikings or maybe the Titans, maybe should they be in the toss-up to you, or do you think the teams I mentioned are really the only teams that have a shot at beating the Bills?
Honestly, yeah, I'd agree with your list. I think the Titans, they could be good, but I'm not exactly inspired by what they have.
I'll save my thoughts for them for later, but they're not many are positive.
No, I agree.
What I would say is, if I had to make a prediction right now, I would give the Bills. I'm going to make my official prediction 14-3 for this Bills team. I think they're going to be really, really good. I think you're talking about some of those dumb losses. I think maybe one of the dumb losses might be to your Dolphins, but other than that, I think this team is really going to have a strong season. And I think, I'm not going to say they're going to win the Super Bowl, but I think they're going to be one of the teams vying for that AFC spot in the Super Bowl for sure.
Yeah.
Do you think 14-3 is a little high, or do you think that's a good prediction? What are you leaning towards?
I'd say that's about right. I mean, I'd say personally the Bills are one of the strongest teams in the league right now.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And I think I'm just really excited to watch this team cook. I'm excited for Gabe Davis in my fantasy league. Hopefully he breaks out. I'm excited to see if Josh Allen can just keep getting better, maybe win an MVP award this year or at least come
Yeah.
close. And I'm really excited to see if this defense lives up to the hype we kind of created for it during this podcast.
Yeah, but I think they're going to be fine. I think this is a very well built team from the players to the coaching to the organization. I think it's just a very well run altogether. And I don't really expect the Bills to disappoint too much.
I completely agree. So that's going to wrap up this episode of the Fan Committee. We talked some Dolphins. We talked some Bills. We're very excited to preview the 30 other teams that have yet to come. So thank you guys for listening today. Make sure to follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, on TikTok. We're starting the TikTok account. We're getting that going. But other than that, hope you enjoyed and have a great rest of your day.